Hi, now that you've made your PKI, you're going to prepare a speech. So an impromptu speech, this structure is actually an event that we do for tournaments. So if you choose to do impromptu, this will be the exact structure. So in Idaho and national rules, you have 7 minutes, and you can divide that up between preparing and speaking. So most of the time you should prepare for 2 minutes and speak for 5. As you're just getting started, you can start by preparing for 3 and speaking for 4, and then ultimately make it your goal to prepare for 2 and speak for 5. Okay, so you're going to get a topic, and it will either be a word, a quotation, or a current event, and then you get a note card and you start your timer. I usually start a stopwatch, count up, so that I can see how much time I have used so far. And then as soon as you're ready, you're going to begin right away. Okay, ask your judge, make sure they're okay and ready to begin, and then you start. You leave your timer running the entire time so that you can see when you reach your 7 minutes. So I have prepared an impromptu. Before going into your impromptu round, you skim through your PKI. I read through it, I review it, and then I put it away. You cannot use notes when preparing for an impromptu speech in competition. So I review my notes before I go into my competition room. But I do bring blank note cards to write notes on. As you're starting out an impromptu, you can use notes. As you become more advanced, you should put your notes away and try to do it all from memory. Okay. So I just took the last 2 minutes preparing this speech. My topic I was given is stand up. That's the entire topic, okay? So I'm going to give a little practice speech for you. Because most of our tournaments will be online this year, we're going to actually practice sitting down. Normally you would give this standing up and you would walk in a baseball diamond. So you start your introduction at home plate. You go to first base for your first point, second base for your second point, third base for your third point, back to home plate for your conclusion. So you walk in a diamond. By doing that, it gives you purposeful movements, so you're less likely to have like nervous movements, like fidgets and rocking and stuff, and it helps your judge to remember where you're at. So instead of walking, I'm going to use my hands to gesture. So it might be mirrored a little bit through our recording, but when I give my preview of my points, I'm going to do it in this structure. When I walk to that point or I move to that point, I'm going to like guide in the direction that I'm going to go. One hand or 2 hands or whatever. Okay. The structure of your impromptu speech should be as follows, and be ready. You should write this down. You're going to start with an introduction. In your introduction, you're going to have an attention getter, which is a story, a fact, or a quote that's interesting and grabs the audience's attention. Next, you're going to introduce your topic, which is, again, a quote, a current event, or a word. And then you're going to preview your main points. So you're going to just give us the titles of your 3 points in order. Today, we're going to talk about this, this, and this. Then you're going to go to each of your main points. And within those, you're going to begin the point, give us some substance, and relate it back to the topic. When you're done with one point, you'll say, now that we're done talking about this point, we're going to go to this other point. So you're going to transition between your points. When you're back to your conclusion, you're going to start your conclusion with a review. In your review, it's the exact same thing as your preview. You're going to say, today we talked about this, this, and this, the titles of your points. Then you're going to wrap things up, and you're going to refer back to your attention getter story and wrap things up really nicely. I'm not going to restate the story, but I'm going to refer to it. So I'm going to give you a little practice speech. I haven't given this speech. This would just be like how I would be doing it in a round. And I'm going to be starting my timer, stopwatch. Okay. My topic is stand up. In the 1960s, there were a lot of individuals who chose to stand up for what they believe in and take action. Some of those individuals included many civil rights activists, such as the Little Rock Nine, who were the first to integrate schools, such as Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. Now, these people took huge stands against inequality and stands for justice. And sometimes we see them as these big, important historical figures that did these huge, great things. However, we too can also stand up against injustices, against things that are going poorly or wrong in our own lives. So today, that's our topic, stand up. And I think it's referring to making a stand, going against those things that are wrong, standing up and speaking out. So today we're going to analyze our topic by looking at three main examples. First, we're going to look at the book, The Hate U Give, by Angie Thomas. Then we're going to look at Maggie Nichols and how she was portrayed in the documentary Athlete A, before finally talking about our first point, will be actually about Taylor Swift and reputation. So we'll talk about Taylor Swift, The Hate U Give, and Maggie Nichols. All right, first off, let's talk about my favorite artist, Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift has been around for music for almost 15 years. She started out as a young 15-year-old country singer and has blown up in popularity and is now a global phenomenon. However, Taylor Swift has had her share of bumpy pieces in the road. At one point in her career, she was having huge bullies bully her and try to get her to stop doing what she loves, stop doing music. These bullies were Kanye West and Kim Kardashian. They made edited tapes and videos showing things that Taylor Swift did not say, editing her words, also making her look like she was a bad person. However, instead of being forced down and hiding away, she came back stronger and she stood up against them. She started speaking out on her social media pages. She started standing for causes she believed in. So instead of letting these bullies silence her voice, she started standing up more for the things that she believed in. She also took that experience and stood up to those bullies by owning a tool that they used against her. And that tool was the snake emoji. Kim Kardashian would use that snake emoji, and so would her followers, to spam Taylor Swift and to make her feel less like, their intention was to make her feel like a snake. So instead, Taylor decided to own that. She stood up by owning this symbol, and her album was called Reputation, and her main symbol for it was a snake. Her entire concert, which is now filmed on Netflix, had huge snakes in the stadium, and she owned that symbol, showing that these people can't tear her down. She's going to stand up against them and own it instead. Next, let's talk about the book The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. In this book, we see young Star who sees her friend get shot by the police when he is unarmed. Throughout the book, Star grapples with how she's going to handle this situation and what she's going to do. And at first, she doesn't want to do anything. She wants to stay silent in the background as an observer. However, throughout the novel, she realizes that she needs to stand up for what's right. She needs to stand up against people that are doing these injustices, and she needs to fight. So she decided to become unanonymous, share her voice, and she decided to march against the injustices that people of color see every day in our country. She decided to march, speak out, and stand up for what she believes in. She was participating in what's called civil disobedience, standing up for injustice and laws, even if, especially if you think that they are unjust. Our final point, we will talk about Maggie Nichols and her portrayal in the documentary called Athlete A. Maggie Nichols is a huge star in the gymnastics community. She was a national champion for a few years, and she was all but chosen for the 2016 Olympic team. However, Maggie Nichols decided to stand up for something that she believed in and something that was harming many people, and she had some really sour consequences come of it. An Olympic team doctor named Larry Nassar was, for 20 years, had been abusing gymnast girls during therapy. And Maggie decided to stand up and say something. She stood against USA Gymnastics and Larry Nassar, and she stood for truth, and she stood to help not just herself, but all other gymnasts that may be having this happen to them as well. So that's a great thing. We all see that as her standing up against a really gross guy. However, she did not make the Olympic team. She took third at the Olympic trials. She should have made the team. Everyone was expecting it. However, she didn't make the 5-person team, and she also didn't make the 3 alternates. And many believe it's because she did stand up and stand out. She should have made the team. All of her skills, all of her records showed that she should have made that and she didn't. So today we talked about standing up. We showed this through the examples of Taylor Swift, Star in The Hate You Give, and Maggie Nichols. So even though you may not be Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, you still can stand up and make a difference. And you should, because in our country right now, we need people standing up for the good. Okay, so if I prepared for 2 minutes, I just spoke for 6, so I went over my time limit. If I only spoke or prepared for 1 minute, I spoke for exactly 6 minutes, so I would have been fine. But when you're doing impromptu, normally we have people called timekeepers that will give you time signals so you can see them. So like 3 minutes left, 2 minutes left, and that can help you to adjust while giving your speech. I also am not used to giving speech sitting down, and so I would definitely need to practice doing this a lot more before I would try this in competition. So you're going to try this. You're going to take a few minutes now, review your PKI, and then I'm going to give you a topic for a Flipgrid in the next video. You're going to take 2 minutes, 3 minutes maximum, and prepare. And then you're going to speak for 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and give a speech. You're then going to repeat the process with a different topic and post a different speech. And then you'll have practice doing impromptu. And this is a speech event you can do at speech and debate tournaments.